Hello and good afternoon, students. This is our second, or I think third to the last topic for this semester. And for today, we are going to discuss the linear regression and correlation. Okay, so for this lesson, it contains the discussion of scatter plot, types of correlation, linear, correlation coefficient, and its significance. You will also encounter how to compute linear correlation coefficient using the technology. Okay? And at the end of this lesson, you should be able to collect, organize, present, and analyze the data, and of course, interpret the results. Also, you should be able to test significance of the relationship of the two variables and interpret its result. Let's discuss first what is a scatter plot. A scatter plot is a type of graph that illustrates the relationship between data points for two variables. Each element of the dataset is plotted as a point whose x, y, or the coordinates associates to its values for the two given variables. A scatter plot has a horizontal axis, or we may call it as x-axis, and the vertical axis, or we also call it as y-axis. One variable is plotted on each axis and made up of marks that represents participants' measure on the variables that are on the x and y axis. Most scatter plots contain a line of best fit, or which is a straight line drawn through the center of the data. Later on, you will see different types of scatter plot. Through the center of the data points that best represents the trends of the data, or trend line. Scatter plots provide a visual representation of the two, which is correlation or the relationship between the two variables. Okay, let's take a look at this example. For example, here's the data and scatter plot that shows the height and the shoe size of 10 selected students in a class. So here is the table, and take a look of this graph. Okay, so this is the graph that shows or that represents this table. So as you can see, those what do you call this, dots, or we call it a small square box to represent the data, and para ma-follow yung trend line ng plots, we had this straight line from the center of the data set. Okay, so as you can see, parang increasing ang ating data. Let's have here the definition of correlation. Correlation is the patterns or the relationship in scatter plots. All correlations have three properties. We call it as correlation by direction, correlation by form, and correlation by strength. To determine the strength of a correlation, you have to look for its numerical value, while the direction of the correlation is determined by the positive or negative relationship. Let's have here the correlation by direction. Positive correlation is like this graph. Both variables move in the same direction. As one variable increases, the other variable also increases. Or as one variable decreases, the other also decreases. So, positive siya kapag same ang movement ng data ng two variables. It's either pataas or pababa. So, kapag mag-drawing tayo ng trend line, parang, or a straight line rather, so, banda dito siya. Assume that it's a straight line. Okay, the next one is the negative correlation. Variables move in opposite directions. As one variable increases, the other one decreases. So, opposite naman sila. Or as one variable decreases, the other is increases. Okay, let's move to the next one. Here is the no correlation. When it is no correlation if there is no apparent relationship between the two variables. So, as you can see in this graph, scattered talaga yung data. So, it means it has no correlation. We have here the correlation by form, the linear and curvilinear. Linear relationship points on the scatter plot forms a straight line. A relationship is said to be a linear if one variable increases or decreases at the same rate as the other variables. Pag sinabi naman natin curvilinear relationship, points on the scatter plot forms a curved line. Kaya nga siya tinawag na curvilinear. This is due to one variable does not increase at a constant rate and may be decreasing at the center point. Okay? Pag linear relationship, the relationship is said to be linear, either increasing siya or decreasing siya. When it is a curvilinear, the line forms a curved line. Here is the correlation by strength, or we also know it as correlation coefficient. It indicates how strong the relationship of two or more variables. The strength is determined by the numerical value. A correlation of 1, whether it's positive or negative, it is said to be perfect correlation kapag equal sa 1. When relationship is a perfect correlation, the data points lies directly on the line on its trend line. So, nasa mismong trend line siya. Okay? Yung mga points or yung scatter plot. The further the data are from the trend line, the weaker the relation, and the correlation 0 indicates no correlation. Okay, you will, the next slides, you will see the interpretation or table of interpretation of correlation by strength. So, yan. Either positive or negative siya. If it is closely or equal to 1, it is said to be perfect correlation. If it is closely or negative or approaching to 0 or equal to 0, it is said to be weak or no correlation. So, please take note of this table. The correlation coefficient. To determine the strength of a linear relationship between two variables, we use the most common type of correlation coefficient statistical measure. We call it as Pearson R or Pearson's correlation. This means that the strength and direction of a linear relationship among variables. It cannot capture non-linear relationships between variables o yung kanina yung curvilinear. It also cannot differentiate between dependent or independent variables. To compute the correlation coefficient using Pearson's R, here is the formula. So, napakahaba niya. Please take note of this formula. And we symbolize the Pearson correlation by small letter r. So here is the meaning of the symbol, the n, the x, and the y. Okay, so we just need the three variables, and then most of the symbols here are just summation or sum of those variables. If the linear correlation coefficient r is positive, as like what I've said, it's a positive correlation. In this case, if one variable increases, the other variable also trends to decrease. If it is positive, If R is negative, the linear relationship between variable has a negative correlation. If one variable increase, then decrease. Again, positive relationship siya, or positive correlation siya kapag positive yung R, and also if two variables will increase or decrease. Magiging negative correlation naman siya if ang sagot natin sa R is negative, and in that case opposite yung dalawang variables. Okay, so let's take a look at this example. The height and the shoe size of 10 selected students in a class. Here is the table. Let X be the height of the students and Y is the shoe size. So I have drawn here the frequency table. All we need to do is fill this up or complete it. Okay, so let's put the X. We have 63, 60, 63. Hindi maiintindihan na sulat. 63, 52, 60, 64, 63, 61, 57, and 62. Okay? Kahit nanonood lang kayo, try to solve it while watching this video so that you can enhance solving mathematical problems. Okay? Adding this up, we will get the summation of x, which is 605. Okay? For y, we have here 11.5, 9, 11.5, 8, 10.5, 11, 9, 10, 10, and 9. Adding this up, actually right now I am solving through the simple calculator. So I hope kayo din. Plus 10, plus 10, plus 9. So the answer is 99.5. For the x and y, it means that you will multiply the 63 to 11.5. Okay. So we have here 724.5. Next is 60 times 9 is 540. Same. 52 times 8. It's 416. 60 times 10.5 is 630. This is 740. 63 times 9. 567. This is 610. 570. This is 558. Okay, get the summation. So adding this up, we will have 6,444. 6,044. Okay, let's proceed to x squared. X squared is, take a look of the column x and then square it. Okay, so we have here 3,969. Then 60 times 9 is 3,600. 63 times 11.5, same. 3,969. 52 times 8, it's 2,704. 52 squared pala, sorry. 60 squared is 3,600. 64 squared, it's 4,096. 63 squared, same. 61 squared ay 3,721. Also, 57 squared, it's 3,249. And then, ang 62 squared natin ay 3,844. Adding this up, okay, let's add. We have 36,721. Let's proceed to y squared. So 11.5 squared. So this is 132.25. Yan, madali na yung 9. Same. 8 times 8 is 64. 10.5 times 10.5. It's 110.25. 11 is 121. 9 is 81. Syempre, ang 100. 181. Adding this up, we will get the summation of y squared. So this is 1,002.25. Okay, I'm trying to check it again. So I have 132.25 plus 81 plus 32 plus 64 plus 110, 121, 81, 75. It should be 75. Okay, so if just in case there's wrong in my table, because I'm trying to solve it like how you solve it. Okay, I'm just using a phone calculator, simple calculator. If just in case may mali dyan, please correct it as long as tama yung process natin. Okay? Intindihin yung process. Okay, so let's proceed to the computation. Substitute the values to the formula. Here is our formula, and then so let's try to write it down. So R is equals Rn is 10. Our summation of x and y is 6,044 minus summation of x is 605 times summation of y is 99.5 all over square root of 10 times summation of x squared is 36,721 minus summation of x squared. Magkaiba to ha. When we say summation of x and then try to square it. This is 605 squared, okay, times square root of 10 times summation of y squared is 1002.5 minus y squared is 99.5 and then square. Computing this using the calculator, so the answer is 0.6243, or let's use the 2 decimal value, which is 0.62. Okay, looking at the table for correlation coefficient interpretation, so here is the table earlier. As you can see, the 0.62 is right here, right? Sa pagitan siya ng 0.5 and 0.69. Therefore, our interpretation is moderate correlation. How are we going to write our conclusion? Therefore, the correlation between the height and the shoe size of 10 selected students in a class is 0.62. And using the correlation coefficient interpretation table, this means that the height is positive moderately correlated to the shoe size of 10. And here is the how we solve it using our calculator. Next is significance of correlation coefficient. The correlation coefficient indicates that the strength and direction of the two linear relationship between two variables. However, the reliability of the linear model also depends on how many observed data points are in the sample by looking at the correlation coefficient R and the sample size N. Performing the hypothesis test of the significance of the correlation coefficient leads us to decide whether the linear relationship in the sample data is strong enough to use as a model of relationship in the population. These are the two hypothesis tests that we need to perform. We have here the null hypothesis, or the H sub O, and the alternate hypothesis, or the H sub A. Null hypothesis: there is not or no significant linear relationship or correlation between the X and Y in the population. If it is alternate hypothesis, there is a significant relationship or significant correlation between the two variables in the population. To draw a conclusion, there are two methods: using the p-value and the other one. For the p-value, here is the YouTube link that you can watch. Okay, this is using Excel or Microsoft Office Excel or the SPSS. SPSS is another app or software for solving statistical problems. Okay, kasi mahaba-haba ito. So here is the YouTube tutorial link. This is the interpretation for p-values. Okay, if p-value is less than the significant level of 0.05, then we have the decision to reject the null hypothesis. If it is rejected, the conclusion will be there is a sufficient evidence to decide that there is a significant relationship between X and Y, since the correlation coefficient is significantly different from 0. So, yan na yung kukopihin nyo. If it is not less than hindi siya less than 0.05 significance level, then the decision is do not reject the null hypothesis. In other books, they call it, instead of do not reject, they say accept the null hypothesis. Okay, so for the safety, we will use do not reject. The conclusion will be there is insufficient or not sufficient evidence to decide that there is a significant relationship between x and y, since the correlation coefficient is not significantly different from 0. For the second method, we will use the table of critical values to make the decision. I will put down in the description box the link or the URL link for the table of critical values, or I will put it in your Google Classroom. Okay? To use the critical level values to make a decision, we need the two formulas. We have here the degrees of freedom, which is TF is equals to n minus 2, and the T value. Okay, and here's the formula, where n is the number of samples and r is the correlation coefficient. Okay, so let's try to solve it. Let's go back to our first example. So ito na yung example natin kanina. With the previous computation, we have here n 10, di ba? 10 students, and our R, or the Pearson R, is 0.62. Now, we will solve for the degrees of freedom. So, df is equals to 10 minus 2. So, our degrees of freedom is 8. For the t value, substitute r square root of n minus 2 all over 1 minus r, then square. So, repeating all those in calculator, we have 2.83. Okay, so therefore, our conclusion, therefore, ang degrees of freedom natin is 8 and t value is 2.83. Okay, what is our interpretation? Okay, so our t value is 2.83, right? And ang df natin is 8. And the significance level natin is 0.05 or 5%. Looking at this table, okay, so this is the 8 and this is the 0.05. Tingin tayo sa two-tailed. Ay, sa two-tailed kasi itong taas is for one-tail. So, dito tayo 0.05 and then sa 8, ang tatama sa kanya is 0.632. If we are going to draw this in normal curve, parang ganyan, di ba? This is the talaga ako pantay. This is the mean. For example, this is the positive 0.632 and the negative 0.632. Okay? Ito yan. Itong gitna na yan. Eh, yung ating critical value ay nasa labas. Nandito siya. 2.83. Right? So, if this is the accepted region, hanggang dito lang dapat, eh, nasa labas yung ating critical value. So it means that this is reject the hypothesis. What will be the interpretation? Looking at the table of the critical values, we will get the positive or negative 0.632 at level of significance of 5% or 0.5, which shows that the 2.83 is outside, nasa labas siya, like this one. Then the decision is to reject the null hypothesis. Okay? Thus, there is a sufficient evidence to say that there is a significant relationship between the height and the shoe size of the 10 selected students. Okay? So that is how you solve the correlation coefficient. I hope you understand this one. Okay? Because our activity is about uh, linear regression and correlation. With that, thank you for listening on this video, and I hope you learn a lot. Okay, so see you on the next class. Goodbye.